stumbled across some things that I find very troubling with it. Just so you know, this is not my first stop. I started by speaking with my son's teachers, followed by a meeting with Mr. Gunty and Mr. Moore, and they recommended that I speak with Mr. Truesdale, which I did as well. So we have done our due diligence, and the Board of Education was not our first stop in trying to get these problems addressed. In case you're not aware, when there's an equal interval scale, a 20% is a passing grade. 80% is the cutoff for an A, 60% is the cutoff for a B, 40% for a C, and 20% for a D. I found that out the very first night that I looked on Skyward to see my son's grades. The first thing I did was go in and look at the email notifications. Parents have a way to set it up so that if they would like to be notified when their child does well on an assignment or does poorly on an assignment, you'll get an email sent to your home. So, not knowing much about the equal interval scale, I knew nothing about it. I went in and I set up my child's grade so that it would tell me if he did well. So I said, okay, if he does better than an 80% on an assignment, send me an email so I can pat him on the back. If he does worse than a 60%, which I assumed was a failing grade, then I would get on it and make sure that he understood what he needed. I started getting just a huge influx of emails all the time. My very first email said, your child got a 40% on his English assignment. So, in panic mode, I called his teacher and I said, why does my son have 40%? And she said, oh, don't worry about it. A 40% is really a 70%. I know that sounds crazy, but that's our new grading system. So you gotta imagine how confusing that was to a parent and somebody who's been in education for a very long time. That didn't make much sense. The equal interval scale, is my understanding, is that it's intended to be used in conjunction with grading rubrics. So in other words, students get grades of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or maybe even a 0, but that those grades are tied to standards or rubrics that tell what a student has to do to get a 5, or what a performance would look like if they got a 4 or a 3. What I've come to find out over the course of this semester is that those rubrics don't exist. Especially, excuse me, in a class like math. My son is still being graded on percents. There are no grading rubrics that say, here's what you need to do to get a 5, son, on this assignment. It's really, you got 18 out of 20, that's a 90%, we're going to convert it to a 4.0 and put it in the grade book. That's what's happening. So I think the intention was that we were going to have clearly lined standards for performance for students, and that they would be aligned to be certain grades of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But those things don't exist yet, at least not across the board in all the courses. And it seems strange to have a standards-based grading system when the standards haven't been laid out. I find that problematic. The other thing, we were at open house, my husband was at open house, and we were shown this conversion chart, if you look on the second page of the handout there, and it shows that the equal interval scale is equal interval until you look at the grade of E. And under the grade of E, you still have a 59-point interval. So these equal intervals aren't really equal if you converting them to your new scale. It's very strange. The other thing that struck me as very, unfortunate, is when you look at the proficiency scale that we were given at open house, and you look at what a 5 is supposed to mean, and a 4 and a 3, look at 1. A score of 1 is a D, and a student will get credit from Morton High School for earning a 1. But the descriptor says that a student provides responses that indicate a distinct lack of understanding and knowledge, and Morton High School is giving those kids credit. I don't think that's acceptable. I think that devalues what we're trying to do here, and I think that looks really bad to the district, I'm sorry to say. From a parent's perspective, when we look in the grade book, every grade looks the same. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Typically, what a teacher will do to indicate that an assignment is important is they'll make it worth more points. And a parent can look immediately and say, hey, that was a 100-point test. That was worth a lot. That was important for my child to know. That was a 20-point quiz. Not as important. And that 5-point homework clearly was of less importance even more. But when you look at an equal interval scale in the gradebook, everything looks like it's exactly the same. And so to get around that, what the district has had to do is they've had to put weightings on these scores. So you don't want a test to be worth 5 points, and a quiz to be worth 5 points, and a homework to be worth 5 points. You want tests to be worth more. So in order to do that, using an equal interval scale, you have to weight the grades. But what's happened here is that there are weights upon weights upon weights upon weights. And it makes it very difficult for a parent or a child to figure out how that grade is calculated. I know because we tried to do it. For example, different skills, so to speak, are weighted differently in a class. For example, in my son's English class, writing is worth 40%, and speaking is worth 10%. You know, different skills are worth different things. But also, tests and homeworks are worth different amounts. Tests and quizzes are worth 80% of the grade. Homework and practice is worth 20% of the grade. But even within quizzes and tests, those things are weighted even further. And so now, in order to calculate a child's grade, you have to take into consideration whether it's a formative or summative assessment. You have to take into consideration which category it falls under, and you have to consider additional weightings that might be put on quizzes or tests. It's confusing. It is opaque. It makes it difficult for kids to understand it, and believe me, I have a hard time understanding it. I don't think it's doing what we intend. A grade should be able to communicate to a parent what's going on, and if a parent can't figure out how that grade is calculated, that's not working. In some cases, because of the strange weightings, a student's semester grade is going to be determined by only 1 or 2 assignments. I know because I've watched it happen in my son's class. And I'm not asking anybody here to intervene on my child's behalf or go talk to his teachers. We'll take care of that. But I want you to see kind of the strange situation that happened. I gave you a copy of my son's geometry grades. He'll be happy to know that I've shared this with the world. But he's had nothing less. There were 24 assignments for the semester. He had A's on all of them except 4. And so you'd ask yourself, what should that child get in that class? You'd think he'd have an A. He doesn't. He has a B. And the reason for that is because of the strange way that the grades, these buckets, they're called, are weighted. He happened to miss one homework assignment in the skill called polygons and transformations. One assignment. And this is after getting A's on all his tests, all his quizzes, all of his homeworks except 1. And because that particular 0 showed up in this particular bucket, it brought his A's down to a B. So it's just very odd how these weights play out. And it is not an accurate reflection of what he knows. Now again, I'm not asking you to go yell at his math teacher because I've already had a conversation with her. We'll get it straightened out. But my son has 2 teachers in the family and a math teacher who can help us figure this out. I suspect that most of the students in this district don't have that. And that's important. It's important that there's integrity with the grades, and that there's important that parents understand them, and I'm not sure that everybody does. Last but not least, really, I'm here also to talk about a solution. I don't want to just come up here and complain. I think the equal interval needs to go. I think you can still do what we want to do, which is make sure that a student's grade measures what they know without putting weights upon weights upon weights. Allow teacher to assign points that make sense in light of how much the assignment should be worth, 100 points for a test or 50 for a quiz or whatever they think makes sense. But the district can still weight the grades. They can still say that tests will comprise 40% of the student's overall grade, or the final exam is worth 20%, or whatever it is that the district thinks is fair. So that a student who does all their homework but fails all their tests should not get a passing grade. A student who knows a lot of things and can demonstrate their skills but has missed a few homework assignments should not be unfairly penalized. I agree with that completely, and there's ways around that. If we want the standards to be communicated to the parents, rather than doing these skill buckets that are on the grade report now, just ask teachers to please be more detailed when they enter assignments. Instead of calling calling an assignment homework number 1, tell us what the assignment was about and which Common Core standard or Next Generation Science standard or whatever that it's tied to. That would help parents understand where their children are struggling and where they're not. The district may also want to consider a mastery program. that would allow parents and students to view what the standards were for each assignment. Right now, I understand you use Mastering Manager. The only people who see that are the teachers and the administrators. Parents and kids never see it. There are other programs out there. Power School is one of them. We use it in my district, and parents and students can look on every single assignment that's ever been given and see which standards were tested and how their child did. So there are other solutions out there. I don't know that equal interval is the way to go. You know, if you wanted to do equal interval, you could tell the community that we're going to change our grading scale from, you know, a passing grade down to 20%, but I don't think the board wants to do that. I don't know that that would fly. But that's really exactly what's happened. So I appreciate your time and your attention. I would be very happy to answer questions if anybody has questions, or if I went fast and you need some clarification, I'd be happy to give it. If you have a sleepless night ahead of you and you want to see how a grade is calculated, it took 7 pages with a math teacher to be able to figure it out. So,
thank you for your time. Board member comments?
Just to wish everyone a happy holiday.
You know, at this point, obviously, if you look around, it's a couple concerned parents and employees, but I still have to comment on how impressive it was today to see those young ladies and gentlemen who not only are succeeding in quite well in athletics, but so many of them doing so well academically. Been doing this 13 years. I've had people ask me